Hi guys, welcome to Watch Hobbyist channel with me, Wayne, and today we're going to look at the Rolex GMT Pepsi from Baselworld 2018. Now this is a watch that I never expected to get, and especially if I did, it's something I didn't expect it this soon. But it's a very interesting release. I think it's polarised a lot of people for various different reasons. Firstly, the premiums that these are going for, but I'm not going to really talk about that today. I'm going to be talking about the watch itself. We can all make our minds up on the crazy situation of how limited these watches are now, you know, and all that side of it. But for me, it was more about the watch itself. I love watches. I'm not bothered about all that for now. I just want to concentrate on the actual what we have here. So we have a watch that's got a new bezel design, a new you know, scenario going on with the colour scheme for a steel model, the Jubilee bracelet, the different movement. There's quite a lot to talk about, but I also want you to bear in mind I've only had this watch less than 24 hours at this point, and I have had this watch, which is its sister watch, around about 18 months. So I do have a lot of experience of the Rolex GMT. So I'm going to compare the two as much as I can. I must also say that this is a different camera to what I'd normally use, so I hope that it comes out alright with certain things like sound. I haven't used this camera for a good while, but my main one is actually in for repair at the minute. So it just arrived. This watch arrived during that period. So looking at the watches, so obviously we have two Rolex GMTs here. We have the slightly older model now. This was released, I think it was around about 2006 or 7, something like that. So it's been around a good while. Rolex tends to work on around about a 10-year refresh, so they were a little bit different in this case. But the refreshed model here doesn't look all that different. If you aren't into watches particularly, you would be forgiven for not really knowing if there's any difference at all. But of course, to anybody that's into watches, we know what the differences are on the outside, but the inside also does have some improvements, as you may be well aware of. The main thing is, though, that these are both very similar watches. They haven't gone too far away from the evolved pattern of the GMT over the years, and what they have done in a rather sort of elegant way is go back to the more original models, but without going anything like faux loom or, you know, that sort of thing, which other companies tend to do. So we have here a watch that really sort of indicates that it's trying to look like something from the 1950s or 60s, but in a modern manner, and I think it works really well. Now, one of the most polarizing things, of course, is the bezel on this watch. Now, this is classed as the Pepsi because obviously, I mean, actually I have a can of Pepsi here. We have the red and blue colours. Now, there's also the Coke, which is a black bezel that has a red hand. That's one of the previous models. We don't have a current Coke in the lineup. Maybe that will arrive down the line. That's what a lot of people actually expected this year. And there's no reason at all why they couldn't do it, because at the end of the day, we now have this red hand, which has been around on the white gold model for a while. And a black bezel which is on the black model, you know. So, but maybe that was too easy. Maybe the rumours are right that Rolex wanted to get rid of some stock of the white gold Pepsi bezels because they're not a massive seller, those watches. Who knows? I don't know. Nobody knows. Only Rolex know. The secrets are way too well hidden, and anything else is just speculation. I don't go in for all this speculation. It just makes no sense. So I don't know why they've done it, but I do know that the blue and the red, they have been seen in pictures, just like I saw on the photos before I bought the watch, that the blue looks more purple, the red looks more plum, and in some circumstances, under certain lighting, that is the case. However, in other lighting, these look as blue and red as you could ever imagine. It's more natural light that brings out the true colours of this watch. Now, unfortunately, I'm still under artificial lighting here, so I'm not sure how it's going to come across. But as I look at the watch when I'm outside, it absolutely looks blue, and it looks almost red. The red struggles a bit more than the blue. But if you compare it to, say, a vintage GMT, so something from the 1960s or so, then, of course, then we start to see similar colours. So yes, although it's not as true red and true blue as some people have expected under certain lights, it does still at least hark back to those faded colours that you see on aluminium bezels. Now, I don't think that was on purpose. I think that's purely just a thing that comes from the process of producing these ceramic bezels. They're obviously not very easy to produce. They can't be. and as a result of that, it ends up where basically the colours go a bit off. Now, I'll try and overlay it. There's a picture I have of this watch next to my friend's BLNR yesterday. The blue on the BLNR is much more blue, but even that can look purple under certain lighting I've found when I had my own one previously. So ceramic always gives an interesting colour. It's never as true to the actual colour name as we expect. It's always like an off-cast of it. The Submariner Hulk, that's one. I mean, I personally had one. I thought I liked it at first, and then the green of that bezel just really started to grate on me. I just didn't like it at all, and I've never spoken to any of my friends that have had one that have liked it yet. So, you know, all these different ceramic colours that we see, they're not quite as true to the name as we sometimes expect. So one of the features I absolutely love about the new model is the red GMT hand. So you can see it there, it's pointing down to around about the, well, just before 6 o'clock or just before the 12 on the bezel. And you can see there it's red, it stands out really, really well. And that's probably the only thing I've never really particularly liked on the older models. So, for example, this one that I have here, which, don't get me wrong, I still love it, and it's not a deal breaker in any way, shape or form, but the hand is green. Now, Rolex is synonymous with green, that's fine, but it can just be a little bit hard to see the hand sometimes. Now, on this model it's not so bad because it has a gold tip, so the gold is very easy to sort of differentiate from the black dial. But if you look at other models, such as the standard steel black model, that also has the green hand, and because it has the silver tip, that's harder to see in my opinion. And then the BLNR, don't get me started on that watch, I'm not a fan of it. I do not like the blue hand, you can't see it under a lot of lights. And let's face it, I know a lot of people will buy a watch just because of the watch it is, they don't always use the functions of it, but for me personally, I do travel a bit, I like the GMT functionality, and I like it to be functional as well as, you know, form over function and function over form, blah blah blah, but I like it to be as functional as possible but still look good. So the red hand coming back is such a great thing. I've not really seen people talk about that, but for me that's the key thing here, is that the function of the GMT is finally back to its absolute 100% best, whereas this one can sometimes just be a little bit difficult to see. The movement inside the watches are actually different, so they, as far as I know from what I've read, this is 90% new parts compared to the older model. So the older model does have the same sort of base movement to the new one, but 90% of the parts have been changed and have become more efficient. I don't know if there's any extra anti-magnetism, but I've never struggled with that personally anyway. I do know that we now get from around about a 48-hour power reserve on the two-tone that we see here, or the older previous gen, with the 3186 movement. We now have what I think is the 3286 movement in here, which has, instead of 48 hours, we have 70 hours. So it's more efficient. You still get the same accuracy rating though. So if you're going out there and you're going to go and purchase a Rolex GMT and you're not sure whether to go for one of these models or one of these models, well, first of all, good luck finding one of these. I hate to say it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the previous generation and previous movements. They are fantastic. The only real world difference that you are going to see is a slightly shorter power reserve. So it depends very much whether you even take your watch off, if it's even going to be a thing for you. So if you are the type of person that wears the watch only at weekends or all week, it's going to make a difference whether you're actually going to notice power reserves or whatever anyway. So just be aware of that. It might not actually be that big a difference. Really, this is just Rolex catching up, making sure that their movements are now, they have the numbers on paper to match with other brands, including their sub-brand of Tudor. Now, speaking of Tudor, I actually had my first hands-on not only with this yesterday, but with also the Tudor GMT, and I was able to compare them, and I got exactly from it what I expected. Now, don't get me wrong, I have my name down for a Tudor GMT. I really, really would like to try that watch, and hopefully it will become a part of my collection. I think it's a fantastic, on paper, value for money watch. I think it has a fantastic hark back to the sort of more original GMTs to a degree even more than this because of the aluminium bezel and things like that. The thing I didn't like was the size of it, the dimensions of it. I'd be interested to see if I wore it for a day if that would get smaller or if it would be as clumsy as I felt it looked, because the standard Black Bay case for me is way too thick, way too slab-sided, and I believe they've used exactly the same case. So when I put it on my relatively small wrist, it just didn't feel like it wore well at all. This is much more svelte. It's the icon that it is, and the Tudor, all I see on the forums is, oh, look at these idiots paying all this extra money for the GMT from Rolex when they could just pay £2,700 or so here in the UK and get the Tudor GMT. It has the same 70-hour power reserve, it's very accurate, 200 meters water resistant, whereas this is only 100 meters water resistant, the same true GMT movement. Obviously, on paper, it's a fantastic watch, but when it came to actually wearing it, it's whether your wrist can pull it off, and it's just down to what you want out of a watch. For me, personally, out of the two, I know there's a massive price difference, but if you took away the prices and you were just looking at the watches side by side, for me personally, I prefer the look, the aesthetic, and the profile of the Rolex GMT here. It just suited me better personally. So the bracelet is the thing I want to talk about next, and obviously it's a big part of the Rolex GMT here, the Jubilee bracelet. It's a point of contention just like the bezel is. Some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. Now, I must admit that recently I tried on the Datejust. The Datejust 41 has a very similar bracelet, if not the same. I tried it on and I really didn't like it. I thought it made the watch feel very light. It didn't feel like the usual Rolex I was used to. And then I started thinking about it and thinking, well, actually, that's probably not a bad thing that it's light. So I started to sort of turn it around in my head. It's something that I'm obviously not used to. I've only had Rolex with oyster bracelets up until this one. And I actually think that that train of thought carries through to this watch even better, or even more so, because, first of all, this is a sports watch. So the great thing about the Jubilee is it's a bit more flexible. So I equate these two to sort of having a pair of jeans with a belt and a pair of sort of jogging pants, where the jogging pants are going to give you more flex, but not so much that, you know, they're going to fall off you. The jeans here are just going to be tight and a bit uncomfortable at times. That's the way I see it. This laterally moves. It just has more flex to it. Now, it's not terrible, don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. It just moves about more than the bracelet on this watch, which just doesn't have the same amount of flex because you have bigger bigger links within it. It's just not going to be able to move as much. And as a result of that, I think that actually makes a lot of sense for a sports watch. You're probably going to be using this in all sorts of different environments and situations, hot, cold, things like that. Great. So we have a bit more flex. We have lighter weight because at the end of the day, it's very hard to get these links. This Jubilee bracelet is actually made up of holes, if you think about it. So I'm just trying to get this to focus. There we go. So, and I've got a cold today, so I'm sure you can hear that in my voice. It's terrible. So you can see, if you look sort of here, you can actually see through the bracelet. So great thing for that is if you've got a really sweaty wrist or something because you're doing some activity, well, there you go. You know, it's going to allow airflow to the wrist. It's a brilliant design. It's really, really clever. The hard thing here is just to get your head around having this sort of bracelet when really it's only been seen on Datejust over the years, which have a certain appeal to certain markets and certain people, but not to everybody. So if you're a true oyster person, then this may be at first sight the worst thing that they did to the Rolex GMT, but in my opinion it's actually a really clever move, and I think it also really helps to separate it from the white gold model. Now, there's been a lot of things said about the white gold owners must be crying because, you know, suddenly they brought this out and it's so much cheaper. Well, first of all, if you look at the premiums these are going for, which I'm not going to get into, there's not much difference. And second of all, I think if you like white gold, you like white gold, and if you like steel, you like steel. For me, I'm generally more of a steel lover in terms of watches. I think it works better as a material for a sports watch. White gold is great on sort of dressy watches, but then the GMT does cross a lot of different boundaries. So I'm not going to get into that, but this Jubilee bracelet helps to set it out because the white gold has basically a white gold oyster bracelet. So obviously if you saw the two side by side, you would know which one is which. We have the polished centre links, which give both a sporty and dressy type of look, so that gives the watch much more versatility. We still have the easy link clasp, so if you've got a really sweaty wrist one day, if you're doing a lot of stuff, you can just basically pop that out and you get an extra link basically, or an extra few millimeters. Now I'm not sure exactly how many millimeters we now get. It seems like you only get a little bit, you get a little bit less than say on the previous model, but I still love the Easy Link. I still think it's the best iteration of any extendable clasp out there because you just know it's either on or off basically. There's no in between, there's no glide lock settings and things like that to know if it's 1 tooth or 10 teeth or whatever. It's just extended or contracted, that is it. I think that's a brilliant thing. Now, I have heard people saying, can you put the Jubilee bracelet onto here? Can you put the Oyster bracelet onto here if you don't like it? So you've got two watches, you might have a BL&R as well, can you switch between them? The answer seems to be that, some people have done it, but from what I've read, they've done it in ways where you have to bend spring bars or things like that. Now, for me personally, I would never trust that. I would never want to do it. And I can actually show you here, using my calipers, how different the actual sort of pins are. So if I go from the end of the bracelet to the, sorry, I'm just trying to judge this. So if I go from the end of the bracelet to the actual where the end of the pin is, on the underside of the new watch, it's about 5.37 mils. Okay, and if I do it on the previous model, which has the Oyster bracelet, then I get around about 4.95 mils. So that's basically from the edge of where the bracelet meets the head to the little spring pin section that you can see there. That is around about 4.9. So there's around about a 0.4 millimeter difference. Now obviously that sounds like absolutely nothing, it's the slightest tolerance, but it will make a difference if you're going to go and try and put a different bracelet on your watch. So just be aware of that. You can't go switching between the two bracelets if you have the ability to do so, if you have the watches to do that with. It's not going to work unless you modify it in some way, and then I would be very worried about this falling off your wrist at some point if you don't do it correctly. So I'm certainly not going to do that, and I wouldn't do that because I absolutely love this Jubilee. Now, I haven't actually measured the two watches. I imagine that the case is exactly the same, so I'm just going to confirm that now. The easiest way is going to be to do it straight across the watch here, because otherwise we can start to get funny readings going on. So I'm just going to make sure it's correct. We're getting about 44.09 millimeters on that watch, and let's just see on this watch, 44.06 or so. So actually, yeah, exactly the same. In terms of height, I'm sure they are no different, but I just want to compare just to make sure. So I've got 12 millimeters height on the new one, probably exactly the same on this one. I can't remember if yeah, 12 millimeters. That's without the Cyclops, by the way. But yeah, about 12 mils. And then in terms of length, I've got 47.6 mil. That's what I love about the GMT watch, is the way it wears. It's just a fantastic watch in terms of its sizing. And this is only rough because this isn't the best caliper in the world, but it'll give you a very close idea. 47.8. So yeah, it's going to be more or less the same basically. And there's always going to be, I'd imagine, tolerances in the production as well of, obviously they have to polish one piece of metal down to a shape. I don't know how that's done and whether there'd be differences between every watch or not, but it's there or thereabouts. So size wise, we've got the exact same thing. The only differences we're seeing here are the bracelet and the movement. You know, that's the main thing. The other thing as well that I really like on this new one is that obviously we have the Chroma Light Loom on both of these watches, so it's like a bluey aqua colour. But on this particular watch it looks great because you have the blue of the bezel. So a bit like with the BLNR where the blue just helps with that loom, it just looks really good. So when you're not in the complete darkness and you've just got enough light where you can see the bezel as well, just really helps it to sort of gel, look really, really good together. One more thing that I do want to talk about, just going back to this bracelet, is the only downside of the Jubilee is how hard it is to adjust it. It's not difficult, it's fiddly. So if you, like me, like to adjust your watches yourself, first of all, they've gone from the 1.6mm screw of the Oyster bracelet to a 1.4mm screw. So that's one thing to make sure you have a 1.4mm screwdriver, because you won't get a 1.6 in to turn the screw. Secondly, you will see that when I pick it up, first of all, it's hard enough to pick up, but you have, basically it's like a solid section here, this never moves, but then we have these hinged areas here, these two prongy bits. And basically if I didn't have the screw in here right now, these would actually fold into here and just become one small unit. So you can see that you can have one that way, one that way. Sorry, I hope you can't hear the bin men that are currently outside. I've got a different camera going on here and it will probably pick up everything. So you can see it just becomes a little bit fiddly. So you imagine you've got to get these two prongs between the rest of the bracelet, you know, when you're actually adjusting it, and you're trying to get the two prongs in, you're trying to get the screw into the two prongs when you've actually got them in place. It takes longer than you would imagine. And I've also noticed that the bracelet that comes with this seems to be shorter than the bracelet you would get on most Oysters. So you may require extra links if you have I'd say more than a 7.5 inch wrist. You might need to actually ask the dealer that you buy from for extra links. I don't have that problem because I have quite a small wrist, but there is some extra extension in the clasp itself. So we basically have this point here. Inside there you can actually move the whole bracelet along the clasp. There's 3 points in here, so that does help. So you could give yourself probably maybe another centimetre by doing that, and then with all the links you'll probably get up to around about a 7.5 inch or so wrist. But my friend has a fairly large wrist, and before I'd even sized this watch he tried it on and it just fit him straight away from the shop. So you can imagine that as a result of that, you might struggle if you have a larger wrist. You know, I also don't know if you get the links free anymore. You used to always get these links free, so like up to 2 links you could request for free. Now I don't think they actually do that anymore. So there's something going on with Rolex and Tudor, where Tudor basically now you don't get the extra free straps you used to get, and Rolex they seem to be giving you a shorter bracelet and you don't apparently get the free links new anymore. So like when you're actually buying the watch. So just be aware of these little things, but that's all I really wanted to add to this review. So if there's anything else down the line when I wear this watch that I come across, then maybe I'll create another video on it. But for now, this is first impressions, and going from, you know, a watch that I've had for a good 18 months or so and absolutely adore, to this new model. Whether this will replace this, I'm not 100% sure at the moment. For me, they are quite different, but if I like this enough, then I probably would wear one less, or, you know, if I don't like that, then I would still wear this. So the movement, the power reserve doesn't make that much difference to me. It's more which I'm going to end up liking aesthetically more than anything. So thanks for watching this review of the 2018 Pepsi GMT. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you know when I bring new videos out. Leave comments if you like, and make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you did like it. And finally, head over to my channel on Instagram, which is @WatchHobbyist, where you'll see all my latest watches or any that I've tried out and I'm considering. Thanks, I'll see you again soon.